I went to Broadmoor Hospital to do my placement, and honestly, it was the best experience ever. Now, this might shock people because of what it stands for, but the reason why I say it was the best experience is because it was my introduction into forensic mental health. So supporting people who, yes, are very unwell, but also are very high risk, and of course have done, terrible crimes and have impacted lives in negative ways and things like that.
What inspired you to take your message to TED stage, and how did you choose the topic of empathy?
Somebody from the NHS, the TEDx NHS, reached out to me to sort of see if I was interested in doing a talk. We spent time sort of solidifying what my theme would be in terms of what kind of message can I share with the public in terms of the work that I do. What is it that I want them to take away from it? And the reason why I chose empathy, I thought that that was really important for us to be empathetic towards people, and not necessarily always in the forensic mental health context, being able to understand or being willing to hear somebody's story, whether you agree or not. Neurodiversity is not just ADHD or ASD, which is autism. There are several other areas that people might require support in. Some people are dyslexic, dyspraxic, and all that kind of stuff. So again, back to my point in terms of getting to know your employee. What are their needs? Speak to them on a one-to-one basis. When I'm doing my assessments, I speak to people. All the assessments, all the reports that I write are always different because I take the time to get to know them, their needs and their backgrounds. And even the interventions I do with them are always adapted to the person.
Can you share what it's about and why this issue needs more attention?
Yeah, so Prison of the Mind is basically an audio documentary that I did, and it was about research around a mental health approach to prisons, to the prison system. The aim was to sort of see what other people are doing, what are the other systems doing, what's going well for them, what isn't going well, and also sort of compare and contrast to our current system here in the UK.
Hey Black Circle family, and we are back for another episode, and I am so pleased today to welcome Jenny Okolo. Jenny is a psychiatric occupational therapist and speaker, and you've spoken on one of the biggest stages at TEDx, which we'll get into a little bit. You are also the founder of SASA Health and Sensory. So you've had such a varied and impactful career. So how did your journey into psychiatric occupational therapy and mental health advocacy begin?
Ooh, when you list it all out,
Yeah.
Honestly, it sounds crazy to me no matter how many times people say it. How did I get into, mental health occupational therapy? So I had always had an interest in how people's minds work. And just to cut the story short, when I was in secondary school, when you can do shadow placements and things like that, I had an opportunity to go to a psychiatric hospital, Maudsley Hospital, which is quite a renowned psychiatric hospital. And that was, I suppose, the first time I'd seen sort of mental health, especially in its severity, face to face. And I saw how it wasn't just the doctors, but there were nurses, there were therapists, different types of therapists who were all surrounding that person to support them. And that's when I realized that actually I could play a part in supporting someone's mental health from a certain expertise. So I found out about occupational therapy. Occupational therapy is essentially supporting people with their daily living, depending on how it has been impacted. So we are dual trained. So that basically means that we're trained in both the physical health and mental health side and everything in between. So we're able to provide a more holistic approach and intervention. So I went to study at university, and throughout your university, very much like doctors and nurses and most health professionals, you have to go on placements. You have to do a couple of hours, actually 1,000+ hours. Wow. Throughout your duration of your degree in order to pass the course. So I had a placement every year. And in my final year placement, they actually sent me to Broadmoor Hospital.
Ooh, Broadmoor.
Yeah.
Intense.
That is intense, right? And I suppose I'd expressed to my tutor at the time that, I was interested in mental health and please like put me into a mental health placement, but I didn't realize that's where they were going to place me.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of research and obviously like I saw what the media had to say about the place, right? And a lot of the time the media can refer to it as a prison, but I really tried to do my own due diligence and, it's not a prison, it's a hospital.
Right.
So my final year, I went to Broadmoor Hospital to do my placement, and honestly, it was the best experience ever. Now, this might shock people because of what it stands for, but the reason why I say it was the best experience is because it was my introduction into forensic mental health. So supporting people who, yes, are very unwell, but also are very high risk, and of course have done, terrible crimes and have impacted lives in negative ways and things like that. But just seeing that there is more to what the media and what people portray it to be as, and as people like myself, professionals who are here trying to support these people, but also trying to protect the public as well. So yeah, I think that was probably my first encounters that really solidified that this was the path that I wanted to go in terms of my professional career. And then I guess that kind of led into like all the other stuff that I do now.
Yeah, that's incredible. And actually, I didn't realize that it wasn't a prison. I've always had this perception that it was.
No.
The
High security maximum hospital, yeah.
Hospital. That's that's incredible. And I briefly mentioned TED Talks. So you did TED with NHS. That's correct, yes. And so what inspired you to take your message to TED stage, and how did you choose the topic of empathy?
So I've always wanted to do a TEDx talk, right? It was on my bucket list from when I was young. But surprisingly, I was always super quiet in school. I never really spoke up. I never really got involved in being on stage. And if I was on stage, I was always in the background. So I suppose with me talking about what I do at work and that's through social media, through LinkedIn and things like that. Somebody from the NHS, the TEDx NHS reached out to me, I would say 2 years prior to that, to sort of see if I was interested in doing a talk. At that time, I didn't know what it was going to be about. So I kept in contact with that person. And eventually when the time came, we spent time sort of solidifying what my theme would be, in terms of what kind of message can I share with the public. In terms of the work that I do, what is it that I want them to take away from it? And the reason why I chose empathy, so the title was How Far Does Your Empathy Go, is because I've always felt that, well, firstly, people ask me, how do you feel working with this particular client group?
Right.
Which is a question that I get. I understand. I would ask the same thing. And it's like, do you agree with what they've done? And of course, no, I don't. I'm a professional at the end of the day. So it made me sort of think about like my empathy, how far does my empathy go?
Yeah.
How far can I go as a person in order to support this person whilst knowing the risks and perhaps what they've done and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to pose that question to the public. How far does your empathy go? And also put it in context of different stories. So looking at the individual's background, what got them to that place. And it's not to make an excuse, but it's just to show people that A, it can happen to anyone.
Absolutely.
And B, again, in terms of headlines, you will most likely see the headline of X person did this, but you won't get the full story of what led them to that point. And I thought that was really important for us to be empathetic towards people, and not necessarily always in the forensic mental health context, but just in general, when we are having day-to-day relationships with people in the workplace and friendships, having empathy, being able to, I guess, understand or being willing to hear somebody's story, whether you agree or not, because the same should be offered to you too. So yeah, that's how the title came about. And, I knew that I wanted to, it was a touchy subject, but I wanted people to leave thinking about how far does my empathy go?
And you make a good point. I think empathy, there's a certain quality I think, doctors, teachers, therapists have, and I think it has to lead with empathy. And I did listen to your talk, and you give like real life examples of situations that people have got themselves into. It's led them there. And I think people need to remember, and this is just my kind of very basic opinion and understanding of it, is that we have to understand this is a treatment. This is an illness at the very core of it. And so, when you're, I guess, separating yourself from the crime, I would imagine that you have to remember that you're treating someone.
Of course, to an extent, you do have to be able to compartmentalize in order to do this type of job. But, you always remember, and at the forefront, it's the risk assessment in any treatment that we're doing. Even a lot of people maybe don't know, but even when somebody is discharged from hospital or released from prison, usually there is that MDT multidisciplinary team discussion with the inpatient and the community team to see what's the best route. So, I think there's a lot that people don't know, but it's just more about, shedding that light on what's happening behind the scenes, the amazing work that's being done, and also some of the gaps as well. I can't sit here and say that the system's perfect because it's not. And I want us all to sort of be honest about, what's actually happening and the roles that we all play as a society.
No, absolutely. And going back to the actual day of the TED Talk, and you looked very polished and you delivered it very beautifully and very eloquently. How do you prepare for such a big stage, and kind of what was going through your mind on the day?
Listen, I mean, in terms of what was going through my mind was, don't mess up your lines and do not fall, because I walked down the stairs and I didn't realize how steep it was going to be. So that's literally what was going through my head. But in terms of the preparation, it was about 9 months of prep, which I was shocked. I mean, when they told me, I was like, wait, what are we going to be doing?
There's a process?
There's a process, yeah. So we were all, and I don't know about the other TEDx talks and like how they do theirs, but with the NHS one, we were all assigned a coach that would support us in bringing together the script, the concept. We also had training from is it RADA?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the performing arts. Oh, wow. Okay, they went deep.
They went, honestly, they were like, no, we want these guys to be on jobs. So, and that was really helpful in terms of our body language and just figuring out different ways to sort of calm yourself down, because it's quite scary. And I don't think it dawned on me until maybe towards the end that actually this is actually happening. And at the start, I'll be honest, I thought that there was going to be a teleprompter.
Oh, right. So you could just,
could just read it, right?
Yeah.
No, they said I had to remember everything. And that's another thing. My memory isn't the greatest.
10 minutes.
That's 10 minutes of just me trying to recite. And at the same time, it's not just about reciting it. It's also about how you perform. It's a, performance as well. But I learned so much from the different people, the experts that we had, from the people around me as well. So we had professionals, those with lived experience too. So it was a really great cohort, and it was a great experience, challenging, but I'm glad.
I can imagine. So what would you say the biggest takeaway or response you received from your TEDx NHS talk was?
I think it's the fact that I would say when people would say, actually, I didn't know that. I see things a bit differently now. I don't know about I thought I was empathetic, but I suppose when I am seeing some of the headlines, or even when I am speaking to colleagues and, I might be a bit harsh, maybe there isn't that much empathy. So I think the biggest takeaway for me was just seeing people reflect. And there is no right or wrong way, but it's just about reflecting and looking back and thinking, oh, how could I be more empathetic? Because everyone can be, even me as a therapist, I'm sure, I could do better. And also I would say is people being a bit more curious about the criminal justice system and the mental health of prisoners, and neurodiversity as well, which is something that I touched on. And I suppose it's not, I don't think people didn't expect that not to be a factor, but it's not something that is spoken about as much. So that's why I try to talk about neurodiversity too. So yeah, I'd say those are the things that were the commonalities of the conversations I was having afterwards.
Brilliant. I want to stay on the theme of empathy, but I kind of want to put it in the context of business and kind of like corporate environment. So how do you think we can encourage empathy in business and those corporate environments?
I think it's about getting to know one another, especially in corporate settings, or just settings that are quite fast-paced, where it's very easy to miss the fact that you're working with human beings. These are people with lives, with feelings and things like that. And I think empathy, the root of empathy is about understanding. And the only way you can understand is by listening and asking questions and trying to build those connections. You might not agree, that's not what empathy is about. But I think in corporate settings, especially with the way society is now financially, and people are really struggling as well. And people don't realize that you spend most of your time at work, even if you are working from home. Work is such a massive part of people's lives. So to know that you're coming into work and being cared for, you're being listened to, you're not just disposable, I think could really help in those corporate settings in terms of being empathetic towards one another. So that's why I think like things like away days and just activities to bring people together just to get to know them is really important.
Yeah, I know kind of the various organisations I've worked for, they've had like a day where they close the whole company down for a day for a mental health break, or you can take out of your, not out of your allowance, but additional to your allowance of holiday as a mental health break. So I think that they are implementing things, and that the awareness has definitely changed in the last 10 years, certainly in the last 20 years. But I think there's always more to do. So what are some ways businesses and organisations can better support mental wellness? I just touched on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a really good question. I think, honestly, practically, because that's another way I like to think, like, what are the practical ways people can help or businesses can help is by offering opportunities. I think that's a massive gap that I'm seeing right now is the work is being done in settings like schools and prisons and hospitals. But when they do go out into the community, it's following on from that. So I know there are some companies that are supporting people with mental health difficulties, for example, or even those who have a criminal history. I know, is it Timson, the shoe repair shop that's always outside of Sainsbury's?
Yes.
So they're really into supporting those with criminal backgrounds. So I think those practical ways is really important in terms of helping people. I think being involved in policy changes is also really important. Policy is such a important factor because that's where that's what people base their decision making on. And I'm hoping that aside from just businesses as well, like even within mental health, like a lot of people don't know the Mental Health Act is still outdated, 1983.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's still outdated and we still use it to this day. So I think policy in business, in our educational system, healthcare system is super important. But yes, just practical ways, and also doing a lot of in-reach work as well, because there's no point in just waiting for people to come to you because some people might not know how to. And also I think it's it doesn't happen overnight. You might put a poster or wave a flag saying, oh, hey, we're here, we do this. But I think there's also something about supporting people along the way and reaching out into those communities that may not otherwise know about what you're doing or feel confident enough to know that they can get that type of support in your workplace. So that's why I try to do as much in-reach work as possible. So actually going into these communities so that they have the confidence to ask for support or just talk to me as just a person. So I'd say those are the main things. And there's loads of things that businesses can do in different ways. People receive and would want support in various ways, not just it might just be to do with developing their skills.
Yeah.
It might be to do with financially, socially, like social housing. That's another factor that impacts mental health. So there's a lot that businesses can do. There's no excuse.
No, there's no excuse. And if we're talking in the context of kind of support with neurodivergence, do you think there's a different way that we need to approach it, or kind of?
I would say not too different. I mean, look, it's to do with how adapting, basically. In terms of neurodiversity, obviously there's different conditions within that. So I think the first thing is to understand the person's needs. Neurodiversity is not just ADHD or ASD, which is autism. There are several other areas that people might require support in. Some people are dyslexic, dyspraxic, and all that kind of stuff. And also it's a whole spectrum too. So again, back to my point in terms of getting to know your employee. What are their needs? Speak to them on a one-to-one basis. When I'm doing my assessments, you have your standardized assessments, right? But when I speak to people, all the assessments, all the reports that I write are always different because I take the time to get to know them, their needs and their backgrounds. And even the interventions I do with them are always adapted to the person. So it's all about looking holistically. And I think that's what companies need to do, especially for those who are neurodivergent. And there's so many different ways. I think those who have lived experience of being neurodivergent have done a great job in terms of speaking up and really trying to explain and express themselves, whether that be via social media or within the workplace as well. So it's just more about putting these things into place and it being consistent. So mental health is now, a lot of people talk about mental health now. It's not an uncommon thing. And I think neurodiversity is getting there. But what I wish, and I speak to my colleagues about this as well, is just, I don't want that to just be a word that people use. Like, oh yeah, we're neurodiverse friendly. Like, what do you mean? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Can you show us? So, just understanding that there's nuance to it.
Absolutely. So I want to change gear a little bit. I want to kind of talk about some of your projects and the things that you've been involved with. So let's go on to your podcast, which is Mind Circles. So kind of what inspired you to start that and what kind of conversations do you explore?
So what inspired me? I used to be part of a podcast a couple of years ago called She's in the Pod with two lovely ladies who I'm still friends with till now. And it was mainly like a lifestyle type of podcast, which was great. But of course, like sometimes I would sort of, once in a while dip in some of like the neuroscience and just some of the things that I would observe maybe at work and things like that. So it's probably taken about maybe 2 years for me to get to the point of thinking that actually I could start a podcast. And when I thought about what that could look like, I wanted to give people sort of bite-sized information around mental health and well-being. So that's in terms of tips, maybe just facts about certain conditions, strategies and things like that as well. And another reason why that I was sort of pushed to do that was because especially in this new age of social media and TikTok, there's so much information that's being spread.
And misinformation as well. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of misinformation as well. And I do think that, especially if you are a health professional, or if you're an expert in something, you don't have to be a health professional, that, why not? Why not add to that conversation? Because you add into that conversation, you're able to dismantle some of the things that just aren't correct that's out there. And at the same time, give people correct information. So I wanted this to be bite-sized. So my episodes are no more than 15 minutes long. If they are more than 15 minutes long, just know that I was really going in.
Yeah.
But there is a reason for that. And that's because, I just want people to be able to spend a bit of time listening. We do mindfulness as well. on there as well, quite short. And it's just a chance for people to just get a snippet of different areas within mental health and neuroscience. And should they want to do further research on their own, then they can do that. Um, so I've only put out 2 episodes so far. It's bi-weekly. I'm still trying to get into my flow of things.
Yeah.
But it's been well received. And I just hope to continue that, be more consistent, and hopefully collaborate as well with other professionals too. Because I don't know everything. I'm an OT. I know mainly OT stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. So I hope to sort of expand in that sense.
I love that you've made it 15 minutes because I think, some people, especially if they do feel like a little bit kind of they've got depression or something, their attention span might not be necessarily there to take all of that information in. So that little kind of 15-minute gives you that burst of what you need and to consider and think about and take away something from it. So I love that format. So you've also done a documentary. So that was the BBC News World Service documentary, Prison of the Mind. So can you share what it's about and why this issue needs more attention?
Yeah, so Prison of the Mind is basically an audio documentary that I did, and it was about research around a mental health approach to prisons, to the prison system. And I did interviews with professionals in Sweden, in the Netherlands, researchers in America. And the aim was to sort of see what other people are doing, what are the other systems doing, what's going well for them, what isn't going well. And also sort of compare and contrast to our current system here in the UK. And I found that there isn't much of a difference.
Okay.
And for example, with Sweden, they have a more sort of laid back approach. But also if you think about the population there, and also the population here in the UK were much larger and everything like that. So it was really nice to hear from different professionals and also see what we're doing that was quite similar. And, there were so many themes that came out of it, even just when we were looking at the prison system. And there was, at the start, there was a lot of focus on health professionals. And then the conversation also went into what about the prison officers as well? The type of relationships that they have with offenders can also play a massive part in the trajectory of that person's life.
Absolutely.
So it was really interesting, and I was really keen on bringing in somebody with lived experience. So we brought in somebody with lived experience, interviewed him, and it was just a great way to offer a different perspective too. So it's only 23 minutes long. I wish it was more, but it's, I guess, enough to give a snapshot of the different views and the different ways that the systems work.
You said something interesting there, and it made me think. You mentioned about how the prison guards are kind of receiving their mental health and their wellness. But then it made me think about, how do you look after your mental health? Because obviously you're dealing with some really intense kind of illnesses, and so it just made me wonder how you look after yourself.
Thank you for asking. So for me, well, I think I do a good job of being able to compartmentalize, like just separate my work life and personal life in a sense. I mean, even though a lot of stuff I do outside of my work is mental health related, in regards to like what you said, some of the cases that I work with can be quite intense. And I think it's really important to have that good support network. I have a really great team. And I know that's a privilege to say that. And I also make sure that I have fun things to do outside of work that's nothing to do with mental health, like in terms of the context of my work. And also having friends that are from different backgrounds, especially career-wise. So I could be talking to my friend who's, I told you, he works in law, or someone who's like a graphic designer, and just like having that variety. I think it's really important to kind of step out of that world, whatever world that you're in, and go into another, and just having something to look forward to. And I realized, especially when I was working in prison, that was probably the most intense part of my career ever, just because of the type of clients that I was working with. It was a Cat B prison, and also like even just, as soon as you go into the prison, you leave your phone in your lockers or in your car sometimes, and you have no contact with anyone in terms of the outside world, unless you step out of the prison until the end of the day. And I think it was coming to that November, December time, and when it gets quite dark. And I remember every time I'd go into work when it's dark early in the morning, I would leave when it's dark. Like, I never got to see the sun.
No.
I never got to see, and I never had enough time to leave the premises and go out for a walk or anything, because by the time I came back, it was time for me to get back to it. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, no, like, this is interrupting my social life.
Yeah.
I need to be able to have that balance. And of course, there's no 50-50 balance, but as long as I had something to look forward to, so whether that's a Netflix show, or a podcast or anything like that, that's how I sort of keep myself sane.
Gosh, no, that actually terrified me, because we don't get sun at the best of times.
Right?
That's tough. So what would you say are the biggest misconceptions about mental health in the criminal justice system?
The biggest misconceptions, I think, are that a mental health is used as an excuse. That's the biggest misconception. Because I don't think people realize the systems that there are in place. Like, yes, somebody can be receiving mental health treatment, but at the same time, due to whatever nature of the crime, the risk is always at the forefront. I also think, in terms of misconceptions, that mental health really isn't a priority in criminal justice system, when it actually should be a priority. Because as much as the punitive approach might work in that sense, there's also flaws to that, because you can send somebody to prison for an X amount of time, and if you don't get to the root of why they got to that place and engage with them in rehabilitation, and actually spend time with them in order to develop those skills, whether that's social skills and whatnot, before they go back into the community, that's how people reoffend. That's how the cycle continues.
It's it's not treating the what's the saying, the cause, not the symptoms.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And we just don't have enough space in this country as well. So imagine anyone who commits a crime just gets sent to prison, no matter what the reason was. And mental health is such a massive factor for why people get themselves into these situations. And oftentimes it gets overlooked. So a lot of the clients that I worked with, it was a men's prison, there was no history of a diagnosis in terms of maybe their neurodiversity until they got to prison. That's when they maybe received their first diagnosis. Why should it be at that point? Why not beforehand? So I think now mental health and having a mental health first approach is increasing much more within the criminal justice system. Even outside of prisons, like just hopefully how the police engage with people in the community, how they're able to pick up on those who are mentally unwell, and the community teams as well. There are a lot of forensic community teams in the community that are doing a great amount of work, but of course with funding cuts and just not enough staff and everything like that, it can get quite difficult. But and
I'm just thinking of how many avoidable deaths may have been avoided if there was that training. I can't not talk about this. Have you watched Adolescence?
Yes.
I
have watched it. I watched it recently, actually. Very thought-provoking. And I think with Adolescence, it shows a part of a massive picture, right? So the young, for those obviously who haven't watched it, watch it. But for those who, especially with young children, in this day and age with social media, there's so much that's happening that we're not aware of. And I loved how, because even when I got to the end of the series, right, I thought, well, is that it? But actually, sometimes that is the answer. Like, that person is guilty, and yes, it's a young person, and sometimes it's hard to comprehend why somebody did the things that they did. And I suppose some of the conversation that I've seen is around, at what point could somebody have intervened, right? Could have been at school, could have been at home. Like, you see all these snapshots that they're trying to portray. But I guess it goes back to the fact that sometimes there isn't a straightforward answer.
Right.
But the whole, I guess, reason for showcasing this is to spread awareness, and also to reiterate that it's everybody's responsibility as well. So the story that I told during my TED talk as well, with the young guy who was autistic that committed a crime, I was looking at the school history, and it's not to put blame on anyone, because I could say the school could have been involved, but do they have the right resources? Are they well supported? A lot of teachers are having to act as not just teachers, but also therapists, parents, counselors, all that kind of stuff. So it was a really interesting show. And of course, it only shows one side of things. But what I really like is that it got people talking. And one could say, why did it take this particular film or show to start that conversation? It should have started yesterday, last week, ages ago. But we are where we are now, and I hope that this can enforce change. And also, another thing that I really liked was that oftentimes mental health or just crime has a face to it, a race to it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And a lot of, I think that's probably what a lot of people struggled with maybe when they were watching, is how could this young white kid that looks so innocent do this? But actually, even in my workplace, I've met people who come from all different backgrounds. I'm talking about lawyers and high profile people who have unfortunately found themselves in certain situations. And are in the criminal justice system or are very unwell. And so the whole point is that nobody's exempt.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's exempt.
No one's exempt. And it was actually kind of horrendous to see race being brought into it. It's kind of like the Twitter conversations and discourse. It's really disappointing, but again, unsurprising. But yeah, this kind of red pill culture is kind of on the rise. Femicide's on the rise, and you said it. It's a village effort. So let's kind of round it out a little bit now. So what are some practical ways people can improve their mental well-being daily?
I would say, really, so it's going to sound cliche.
No, go for
but put yourself first.
Yeah.
And what that looks like, it can look like anything. Put yourself first in the workplace. So maybe advocating for yourself, whether that's at home, and making space for you to be able to just be free. I think, especially again in this day and age, like, it's so difficult to take that time out to just be with your own thoughts and to figure out what is it that you actually like or what you don't like, because you're influenced by so much around you. I'm influenced by so many things, and sometimes I'm like, wait, is this actually what I would do, or is this because somebody else did that? And that can also, you can be influenced subconsciously as well. So I would urge people to figure out what it is that they want, and that could, I think what could help is journaling, trying out new things. I think a lot of times we are complacent, or we're comfortable in doing the same thing and doing what we know best, right? And when we are put in situations where we have to step outside our comfort zone, it's like, oh no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. But if you keep doing the same thing, how will you grow? If you keep doing the same thing, how will you grow? How will you know what else you like and don't like? So that's why I always, as much as I might complain to my friends and say, oh, I don't think I want to do this. I try as much as possible to do things that I'm not used to do things for the first time, because that is the way I've seen that I've grown. And that's helped my mental health, because that's helped me to realize that I can do so much more.
Yeah.
I have so much more potential. So always be willing to learn and be willing to try new things. Put yourself first and be kind to yourself too. If somebody else, don't seek validation in other people, but if someone says or does something that you don't like, as long as you know who you are and what you stand for, that's what should matter.
I love that. If somebody's struggling with mental health, what advice would you give them to kind of get those first steps and seek some help?
So if you're struggling with your mental health, 100% inform your GP. The NHS, which is the National Health Service here, we have a lot of links with the GP and a lot of services that are available, like talking therapies. There are also organizations like Mind too. I realize in saying this that there are long waiting lists. And I always include this because I don't want to give out all this information without addressing the other side. There are long waiting lists. So I would urge people to look at charities like Mind, the Black Mental Health Network as well, who have links with the NHS to sort of speed that process up. But if you are in crisis, the crisis line is always available 24/7, NHS crisis line, and speak to a professional.
Yeah, that's great.
Your friends are great, but they are just your friends, right? If it gets to that point where it's critical to your safety, you should seek a professional, because they would be the best people to guide you.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll be sure to include those links into the episode. So lastly, what's next for you? Upcoming projects, talks, collaborations?
What's next? I probably have some talks, but I can't even remember. But I'm just trying to be consistent with the podcast, Mind Circles. Mind Circles is also we do events. We had an event yesterday. And these events are sort of laid back lecture style talks from experts from different backgrounds. But the topics are under the umbrella of mental health and neuroscience. So yesterday we had Fahima Mohammed, who spoke on prisons and mental health and neurodiversity. So she's a neurodiversity coach in prisons. And we had various health professionals and students and just people who were interested in learning about that. So I would say that's probably the main thing that I'm focusing on at the moment. And of course, just spreading the word about what I do and trying to tackle the stigma and the taboo around mental health in these type of settings, and especially within our community.
Yes, brilliant. We look forward to seeing all of that and following your journey. So I'm going to ask you about your values now. So one that you hold, a value you hold for your personal life and a value you hold for your professional life. So let's kick it off with your professional life.
So for my professional life, it is a value is just knowing my worth and also how I could be in service of other people, and playing on those strengths. And I think just knowing what works well for me as a person. So my strengths are that I'm a good listener. I like having conversations with people. And those are the ways I feel like I could be of service. So it's just sticking true to that. And whatever that threatens those type of values in the workplace especially, I try to seek support or take myself out of that situation, because that is how I work best.
Yeah, I love that. And for your personal life?
For my personal life, I guess it's kind of similar in terms of just my faith. And so I'm a Christian, and just making sure that whatever I do is in line with that. Again, being of service to other people, supporting people, and just trying to live my life as honest as possible, I would say. And I guess just understanding that I'm not perfect and the next person isn't perfect, and we're all just trying to live this life. So my faith is really important to me, and I guess it kind of trickles into my work, professional life as well, in a way, now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, those I would say are the values that I hold close in my heart, like family, faith, and just staying true to myself.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really insightful conversation. If people want to follow your journey, how can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn if you want. I know people sometimes don't like LinkedIn, but honestly, I really do like it.
Yeah.
So that's just my name, Jenny Okolo. You can find me on Instagram as well at Jen Okolo. And then Mind Circles Talks. What else is there? I think those are the main ones. And then the podcast is called Mind Circles Podcast. So you can find me on those platforms and just send me a DM or anything and I'll respond.
Amazing.
I've been a bit late with my responses. Just bear with me. It's been a busy week. But usually I will respond.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And guys, thank you so much for joining the Black Circle once more. And if you want to follow the Black Circle journey, we are on YouTube, Black Circle Podcast, and Instagram, the Black Circle Podcast. Thank you, guys.